Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earliest crimes. But first, the coloring. Today I will be coloring this stamp set from Pink Fresh Studio. It's called Heart of Gold. I'm also going to be using the Spellbinder's Mirrored Arch dies. I thought about using this polka dot embossing folder. I decided not to. I have some black and green cardstock and a piece of Nina cardstock to color on. I'm using colored pencils today, and this is my color palette. All of the things that I used in this will be linked over on the blog post, which is linked down in the box below. I am stamping the stamp with Versamark or Versaclair Nocturne Black ink. I'm going to leave the stamp in my MISTI so that when I'm done coloring with the colored pencils, I can stamp over it. The colored pencils kind of dull down that black outline. I will be using some, like I said, colored pencils. I have some enamel dots or flat back pearls, I think, from Honeybee Stamps. I have some foam tape. And ignore the Band-Aid on my finger. I was also cooking dinner while I was making this, and then I ripped my fingernail off. So, you know. Anyway, now that we've talked about the coloring, let's go ahead and talk about the crime. Our journey today takes us to South Carolina. Originally part of the territory of the Carolinas, the North and South eventually became two separate states, which was in 1712, and South Carolina became the 8th state to join the Union on May 23, 1788. South Carolina is home to the first U.S.-based tea farm, and that is how sweet tea became the drink of the South. I don't drink it, I don't know, but apparently it is the drink. Christmas poinsettias were first nationally grown in South Carolina. South Carolina is home of American golf, and South Carolina is home of a venomous spider, the black widow, but not that kind. Today, we're not talking about the spider. So Rebecca Becky Kennedy was born sometime in 1767. I don't have a month or a date, and she was born in South Carolina. She was the daughter of James Augustus Kennedy, and his wife, whose name I could not find. It was recorded that Becky's mom died when she was little, and that left James to raise Becky and her two younger brothers by himself. I did not find any record of James remarrying. And reportedly, Becky and her father had quite a close relationship. The next time we hear about Becky is with the registration of her wedding. John Cotton was born on the 15th of February, 1765, in Edgefield, South Carolina, to Thomas and Ann Cotton. John was fourth of their 14 children, 5 girls and 9 boys. Side note, all of their children except one lived until adulthood, which was kind of miraculous for that time period. Now, here is where records get weird. I have a marriage record between John Cotton and Elizabeth Sullivan in 1768 and a family record of 2 sons. And the record also shows that Elizabeth lived until 1874, which she would have been about 83. But the records also indicate that John Cotton married Becky Kennedy in 1785 or about there, and they also had 2 children. Or they also had children, rather. There were 5 children listed, 4 boys and a girl. What I didn't find was a divorce record for either marriage. And Elizabeth was listed on the 1840 census with her maiden name, not her married name. So that was an interesting twist of the story, but it's not even the whole story. Our story today revolves around the marriage between John and Becky. So, we don't know a lot about it, which is, I mean, that's what happens when we go back in the back. We're like late 1700s, early 1800s, right? What I did find was that John and Becky lived in Edgefield or near Edgefield, South Carolina, and they lived not far away from James, Becky's father, and her 2 brothers. Now, sometime in about 1789, James was involved in a land dispute with 3 of the people who owned land next to him. And this dispute became quite aggressive. and it eventually led to a physical altercation that sent James running, and he ran to John and Becky's house to hide, or I guess to hide, or for reinforcements or whatever. But that's where he went. And the men he was fighting, his neighbors, followed him all the way to the Cotton's house, ran right into the house after James, and shot him right there in the kitchen in front of John and Becky. And much to Becky's dismay, John did nothing to interfere or try to protect her father. And apparently this changed how she felt about him, and it ate away at her. She said her husband was, quote, a coward only fit to milk the cows and wear petticoats. So she really, really began to dislike her husband. This change of feelings toward him turned into what some people described as pure hatred. And over the course of the next 5 years, it just got deeper and deeper. And she just really did not like her husband at that point. One night in 1794, so this is 5 years after James' death, John was asleep on the bed in the upstairs bedroom of their home, and Becky quickly and quietly crept up the stairs with the axe she had taken from the woodpile, and without waking her husband, brought down the axe on sleeping John, and he died rather quickly, apparently, without raising any fuss. So, mission accomplished, I guess. Becky ran to get her brother and get his help to hide her husband's body, and they hid him in a potato cellar. And as soon as that was done, Becky ran. She took off, and she got as far as Kings Mountain, North Carolina, which was about 140 miles away. She was captured and then taken back to Edgeville to stand trial for the murder of John. Apparently, there was not a real surprise to anybody who had killed him. Now, here's where we get the twist, or the other twist, or the next twist, I guess. Apparently, while Becky was on the run, a body floated up in a pond. And when that body was pulled from the pond, another body was found. And these two men were also reportedly Becky's husbands. She, I guess, or according to the story that I read, had been married 2 other times. One of the men they found was Erasmus Smith, and he had a mattress needle driven through his heart while he slept by the fire. The second was a man named Joshua Terry, who was given a deadly dose of nightshade in his herbal tea. So what happened to these first 2 husbands? Well, clearly Becky happened to them. And it seems that when she was done with them, she took them to a deep section of Beaver Dam Creek, wrapped them in bricks, and threw them into the murky water. And that spot is now known as Beck's Hole. I mean, it literally was her dumping ground. So, in addition to standing trial for the murder of her husband, John, Becky was also standing trial for the death of her other 2 husbands. And apparently there was quite a bit of evidence that had been gathered against her, and the state was confident that they were going to succeed and that she was going to be found guilty and go to jail, and probably, they didn't regularly or often sentence women to death in those days, but I'm guessing that's what they were kind of hoping at this point, because 3 dead bodies, I mean, wow. People in town were just as sure that Becky was guilty and that she was going to go to jail. This was like the slam dunkingest case that they had seen, right? So this all-male jury is impaneled, and they are listening to the evidence against Becky, and they're in it, right? They are listening, they are paying attention, and the prosecution has given all of its really, really good evidence. And the best witness that the defense had was Becky herself. She actually testified on her own behalf. And after her testimony, in spite of all the evidence that the state had gathered, the jury acquitted Becky of the murder of all of her husbands. They said that they thought a woman of her looks and personality could not be guilty of murder. So apparently, Becky was a looker. I tried to find a picture of her. I did not find one. I found kind of a drawing, which I think was not based on her. I think it was just a drawing of a pretty woman in that era of time. So if that wasn't weird enough, if Becky getting acquitted because she was pretty and flirty wasn't enough, after her trial, she married one of the jurors. And guess who was at their wedding? The other jurors. I mean, jury tampering, anyone? I'm just saying that should be flags flying everywhere, right? Now, Becky's apparent stunning and good looks and the ability to flirt and convince anyone to do anything she wanted had been a lifelong skill. However, it only lasted so long. On May 5th of 1807, so this is 12 years after her husband's death, okay, Becky was standing on the steps of the county courthouse talking to and flirting with a young man. And along comes her younger brother, Stephen. And seeing her, theoretically she's still married to the jury guy, right? And Stephen sees her flirting with and talking to this young man, and he is overcome with anger. He is incensed. He has spent his entire life watching his sister flirt and talk her way into and out of trouble, and he was over it. He was done. I'm supposing that this is the brother who was called to help her hide her third husband's body, because he was really, really angry. He walked up to her on the steps of the Capitol building, smacked her in the head with a rock, and Becky fell to the ground and died right there in a pool of her own blood. And nobody stopped him. Stephen wasn't charged with murder. In fact, he took a guardianship of Becky's children, and when he migrated west, he took them with him. His grave was actually found in Mississippi. There is a large family group of Kennedys there, and it's assumed that it is because of him, Kennedys and Cottons, and they found his grave in Mississippi. Nobody knows where Becky was buried or who buried her. Like, did her husband come and get her? Did she go to Popper's Field? Like, nobody literally knows where Becky was buried. Another weird twist in the story. There was a traveling preacher named Mason Locke Weems, and he had I don't know if habit's the right word, but a habit of writing pamphlets. And he actually wrote a pamphlet entitled The Bad Wife's Looking Glass, or God's Revenge Against Cruelty to Husbands. And this pamphlet was written about the fateful tale of Becky Cotton. And he wrote it in 1810, 3 years after her death. So she became the what not to do in marriage. She was the poster girl for this particular pamphlet. The town of Edgefield, South Carolina, that was weird, is supposedly haunted by the ghost of Becky and her dead husbands. Now, a couple of things to note. One, I did not find marriage records for Becky and her other husbands. I did not look a ton. The one family tree I had did show that she had married the other two, Erasmus and the other one, the one that she poisoned with his tea, but it didn't have marriage dates. I didn't look very hard. I will admit that. One thing I did find in my reading is that all of the court records for Becky's trial are lost. They have just, over time, disappeared. Just no explanation. There's like, not that there was a fire, that, nothing like, oh, well, when the prison moved, when the county court records moved, there was a flood, there was a fire. They're just gone. They're just gone. So we don't have any more transcript of her testimony or of the trial or anything like that. Now, third, there was a woman named Latrina Brown who lived in Edgefield, and some people said that she was a psychic or a medium. And she said, talking about Becky, quote, she got a vendetta against men, and every time she got in trouble or she wanted something, she found a way to find a man who had what she wanted, and she was that black widow. She would get what she wanted from them, and then she would murder them. End quote. And that's the whole story, or at least the whole story that we still have records of. I know it's a short one this week, and I'm sure there are other stories I could have told, but this one piqued my interest because of all of the weirdness of it. John having 2 wives at the same time with children. So clearly that could not have happened. Either there was 2 John Cottons, or his marriage to his first wife happened sooner than the record indicated. I don't know. The other thing I found interesting was how did they get all this information? Like, how do they know how the 2 men in the creek died? I mean, she had to have told them, right? She had to have told somebody. Maybe it was her brother who knew, and maybe he was the one who gave them all of the evidence about how those men died. Unless the needle was still there, I don't imagine the poison would still have been traceable. Also, dates from when she was married to those men. I wish I had looked a little bit harder for those. I'll be honest. I'm curious about those dates. But what a weird story. Normally, I would say that a girl who grew up in a close relationship with her father would not have such weird men issues. And everybody said her and her dad were close. So what was her deal? Unless it's like the lady said, she just knew that she could get men to do what she wanted, to give her what she wanted. And when they were done with that, she was done with them. I just don't even know. Interesting story. I want more details. But yeah, I know it's a short one, but it was an interesting one. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed the story. I have a couple of other videos here I think you would like. I've also added that subscribe button. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me what you think about all this. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it, and have a really fabulous day.